The battlefield was silent after the storm. Pieces of destroyed ships drifted in orbit above Horizon 6, glowing faintly in the sunlight. The human defense fleet was battered, many ships scarred and broken, but they still stood. The Cathari fleet, shocked by their failure, had retreated beyond sensor range. For the first time in living memory, the Dominion had been forced back. On the command deck, the crew sat in stunned silence. Some cheered weakly, others simply stared at the wreckage as if unable to believe what had happened. Elias Ward stood tall in the center, his face weary but unbroken. Humanity had held the line. Beside him, Liara lowered her head. The glow in her silver eyes dimmed as the strain of using her power faded. She swayed slightly, and Elias reached out to steady her. Their eyes met again, and she managed a faint smile. "You were right," she whispered. "They can be stopped." Elias nodded. Not just stopped, defeated. Word of the battle spread quickly. Across Horizon 6, colonists poured from shelters, raising their heads to the sky with new hope. For days they had feared that the Cathari would enslave them, that their new home would be lost. Instead, they had witnessed something no one thought possible: the Dominion retreating. But Elias knew the war was far from over. He gathered his officers in the strategy room, where holomaps of the system glowed across the table. Liara sat quietly at the far end, her presence both reassuring and unsettling to the others. "They will come back," Elias said firmly. "The Cathari don't forgive failure. Next time it won't be one fleet. It will be many." "Then we don't stand a chance," one officer muttered. Elias shook his head. "We stood today. That means we can stand again. Humanity has faced impossible odds before. We don't run. We adapt, we fight, and we survive." He turned to Liara. "But to do that, we need more than weapons. We need knowledge. We need to understand the Dominion, how they fight, how they think, how they rule." Liara's eyes met his. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she nodded slowly. "I will tell you everything." For the first time, a Cathari spoke openly of her people's empire. Liara described the hierarchy of the Dominion, the fleets spread across hundreds of star systems, the way they conquered without firing a shot by bending minds to their will. She explained their weaknesses too, the reliance on their psychic control, their overconfidence in victory, and the arrogance that blinded them to resistance. The human officers listened in silence, some in awe, others in fear. Elias listened most closely of all. Every word was a weapon, every secret a tool. When she finished, he leaned forward. "If the galaxy has lived under their shadow for so long, then maybe humanity's stand can be more than defense. Maybe we can be the spark that changes everything." Liara stared at him. Her chest tightened, not from doubt, but from something else. Hope. No one had ever spoken of defeating the Dominion. No one had ever dared. Yet Elias said it as though it were possible, as though it were inevitable. The following weeks were filled with preparation. The colony rebuilt its defenses, engineers repairing damaged ships while scientists worked alongside Liara to study Cathari technology. Pilots trained day and night, inspired by their survival. Liara walked among them, no longer a prisoner, but not yet fully trusted. Children stared at her silver eyes with curiosity, while adults whispered about whether she was an ally or a spy. Yet each day she worked beside them, offering knowledge and guidance. Slowly, suspicion turned into respect. One evening, she stood with Elias on the edge of the colony's main settlement, watching the sun set over the mountains. The air smelled of fresh soil and wildflowers. "Your people are different," she said softly. "The Dominion would see this world only as resources, as fuel for conquest. But your people, they see beauty, even in the smallest things." Elias smiled faintly. "That's what makes us strong. Not just our weapons or our ships, but what we fight for. We don't fight for power. We fight for each other." Liara looked at him, her heart stirring. She remembered the first time their eyes had locked when she had tried to break him, and instead felt herself change. Now she understood what had truly happened. She had not surrendered to his strength. She had surrendered to his humanity. Far beyond Horizon 6, the Dominion seethed. The failure of the fleet was unheard of, a shame that demanded vengeance. Admirals gathered in their grand halls, silver-eyed and merciless, plotting their return. But cracks were already forming. Rumors spread of the human world that had resisted. Whispers traveled from one subject race to another. The Dominion can be beaten. And in the silence of her chamber, Liara's former mentor, an elder envoy, wondered why her student had not returned. She closed her eyes and stretched her mind across the stars, seeking the bond she once shared with Liara. What she felt was shocking, not obedience, but defiance burning bright like a star she could not extinguish. The Dominion would not forgive. They would come again, stronger, more ruthless. But for the first time in centuries, the galaxy had seen something new. A people who did not bow. Humanity had awakened something greater than fear. They had awakened hope. The days after the battle turned into weeks and Horizon 6 slowly healed. Ships were repaired, farms reopened, children returned to school. But beneath the calm surface, everyone knew the truth. The Cathari Dominion would come again. Commander Elias Ward spent long hours in the strategy room, studying maps of nearby systems. His officers brought him reports of supply shortages, pilot training, and the slow progress of repairing the orbital station's defenses. Every report reminded him of the same fact. They were still vulnerable, yet for all the challenges, morale was higher than ever. Humanity had stood against the Dominion and survived. That victory, no matter how small, gave the colonists strength. It spread beyond Horizon 6, too. Merchant ships carried the story to other colonies, to Earth itself, and even into the shadows of alien space. A single whisper passed from world to world. The Dominion can be resisted. Liara walked through the colony one evening, her cloak brushing against the dusty streets. Children pointed at her, their silver eyes filled with wonder, not fear. Farmers offered cautious greetings, and workers in the shipyards gave respectful nods. She was no longer seen as an enemy envoy, but as a strange, silent guardian who stood beside the humans. Inside, however, Liara was torn. The teachings of her people still echoed in her mind. The Dominion is eternal, resistance is hopeless. But every day among the humans showed her another truth. They laughed even in hardship, shared food even when hungry, and worked together in ways her people never understood. When she thought of Elias, her doubts grew sharper. His determination had shaken her on the day they first met. Now it inspired her every time she saw him leading his people. He carried no psychic power, no shining gift. His strength was his will, and somehow that was stronger than the Dominion itself. One night, Elias found Liara standing at the edge of the settlement, staring up at the stars. "You're restless," he said quietly. Liara turned, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "They will not forgive me," she admitted. "The Dominion has already marked me as a traitor. They will send envoys stronger than me, fleets greater than the one you faced. You cannot imagine the storm that is coming." Elias stepped beside her. "Then we'll weather the storm. That's what humanity does." She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you believe so strongly? Why do you never doubt?" He smiled faintly. "Because I've seen what happens when we stop believing. Humanity only survives when we keep moving forward, no matter the odds. That's who we are." Her chest tightened. In that moment, she understood that his faith was not just for himself, but for everyone around him, including her. The next day brought unexpected news. A damaged freighter limped into Horizon 6's orbit, its hull scorched from battle. The crew were not human, but members of another race long thought broken by the Dominion. Their leader, a weary alien with dark feather-like crests, bowed before Elias. "We heard of your victory," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "We thought it was only a rumor. But if it is true, then maybe we can stand again too." The crew explained that their people had once resisted the Dominion but had fallen after centuries of oppression. Now hearing of Horizon 6, they dared to hope once more. Elias listened carefully. "If you're willing to fight, then humanity will stand with you. But you must understand the path will not be easy. The Dominion won't forgive any of us." The alien leader straightened, determination in his eyes. "We have lived in chains long enough. Better to fight and fall than kneel forever." Liara watched silently from the corner of the room. She felt the weight of the moment. The humans were not only fighting for themselves anymore. They were becoming a beacon for others. The fire Elias carried was spreading. Over the following weeks, more ships arrived. Scouts, deserters, refugees from across the stars. Each came with the same story. They had heard of the humans who defied the Dominion. Some offered weapons, others knowledge, others only their will to fight. Horizon 6 transformed from a single colony into the heart of a growing resistance. Training camps filled the fields, workshops turned into factories, and pilots of many races flew together under the same banner. For the first time in history, the oppressed races of the galaxy began to unite. Elias knew it was fragile. One crushing defeat could shatter everything. But he also knew it was the only path forward. Humanity could not stand alone. They needed allies, and in Liara he saw the symbol of that unity. Once an envoy of the Dominion, now she stood beside the very people she had been sent to enslave. Her silver eyes no longer inspired fear. They inspired courage. But far away in the Dominion's grand citadel, the High Council gathered. Silver-eyed envoys and admirals spoke with voices of steel. The shame of Horizon 6 burned like fire among them. The humans must be erased, one admiral declared. Their defiance spreads like a plague. They are nothing, another argued. A primitive race clinging to stolen victory. Send 3 fleets and they will be ash. But among them sat Elder Celira, Liara's former mentor. Her gaze was calm, her voice steady. Do not underestimate them. I have felt their strength through Liara's bond. Humanity is different. They resist not only with weapons but with spirit. To face them, we must bring more than fleets. We must crush their hope itself. The council agreed. Preparations began for a campaign unlike any before. The Dominion would not send envoys to enslave. This time they would send executioners. On Horizon 6, Elias did not yet know how soon the storm would break. But he felt it in his bones. Standing on the command deck looking out at the stars, he whispered to himself, "They'll come for us. And when they do, we'll show them what humanity truly is." Liara stood beside him, her silver eyes glowing softly. "And I will stand with you until the end." The bond between them burned stronger than ever, not as enemy and conqueror, but as allies in the fight for freedom. For the first time, Elias believed the impossible might just be within reach. The galaxy was awakening. The colony of Horizon 6 was quiet that morning, but Commander Elias Ward felt the tension in the air. From the command deck of the orbital station, he could see the planet below. Green fields, silver rivers, and clusters of human settlements scattered across the valleys. It was a new world settled only 30 years ago. For the colonists, it was a place of hope. For Elias, it was a responsibility. He had served in the Earth Defense Navy for most of his life, and now he was assigned to guard this faraway colony. It was supposed to be peaceful duty. Pirates sometimes threatened the shipping lanes, and the occasional meteor storm required careful navigation, but overall, Horizon 6 was safe. That peace ended when the unknown fleet arrived. At first, the sensors picked up faint energy signatures on the edge of the system. Elias ordered his crew to stay alert. Within hours, the signals grew stronger. Ships were approaching, dozens of them. Their designs unlike anything in human records. They were large, sleek, and dark like blades of obsidian cutting through the stars. "Unknown vessels entering system," the sensor officer reported. His voice shook slightly, though he tried to sound professional. "They are on direct course for Horizon 6. The crew turned to Elias, waiting for his command. He stood tall, hands clasped behind his back. Years of service had taught him to remain calm even when uncertainty threatened to crush him. "Open all channels," he said firmly. "Let's see if they want to talk before they try to shoot." A hush fell over the deck as communication attempts were made. At first there was only static. Then, a voice echoed across the speakers, smooth, cold, and strangely melodic. "Humans of Horizon 6, you are now subjects of the Cathari Dominion. Do not resist. Send your leader forward to receive our envoy." The crew exchanged uneasy looks. Elias narrowed his eyes. The Cathari Dominion. He had never heard that name before. Humanity had encountered several alien species since venturing beyond the solar system, some friendly, some neutral, a few hostile. But none had ever spoken with such certainty, as if conquest was already complete. Elias answered calmly. "This is Commander Elias Ward of Horizon 6 Defense. State your intentions clearly," the voice replied without hesitation. "Surrender. Compliance will ensure survival. Resistance will bring only ruin." The channel cut off, leaving silence behind. The following hours were filled with preparations. Civilian transports were ordered to ground. Defense ships formed a protective line around the planet. The colony government urged calm among the people, but whispers of fear spread quickly. When the Cathari flagship finally entered orbit, the humans could see its scale. It dwarfed even the largest Earth-built warship, stretching like a floating city. It moved with a grace that suggested power beyond human understanding. A small craft detached from the flagship and headed toward the orbital station where Elias waited. This was the envoy. Elias stood in the docking bay as the alien vessel landed. Around him, armed soldiers stood ready, though he knew weapons would mean little if the Cathari truly wanted war. Still, humans had always met threats with courage, not surrender. The craft opened, releasing a faint mist. From within stepped a figure unlike any Elias had seen before. Tall and slender, the alien carried an aura of authority. Her skin shimmered faintly, reflecting light like polished glass. Her eyes were deep, glowing silver pools that seemed to move like liquid. She was not armored nor armed. She walked with calm confidence, as if certain no harm could come to her. "I am Liara," she said, her voice soft yet carrying across the bay, "envoy of the Cathari Dominion." Her gaze swept over the humans until it fell upon Elias. The moment her eyes locked with his, something shifted. It was subtle at first. Elias felt a strange pressure, as if invisible hands pressed against his mind. His thoughts grew heavy, his will seemed to waver. Liara's eyes glowed brighter, pulling at him, urging him to kneel, to submit, to surrender completely. But Elias did not yield. He clenched his jaw, focusing every fiber of his being on resistance. His mind pushed back against the strange force. He remembered Earth, the long struggles of humanity, the countless times humans had stood against the impossible. And in that moment, instead of falling under her control, he held firm. Liara's eyes widened. Her steps faltered for the first time. The connection between them did not feel like dominance anymore. It felt like a clash, a battle of wills, a link neither of them expected. "You," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. "Impossible." The soldiers glanced at one another, confused, but Elias kept his gaze steady on her.
He didn't know what had just happened, but he knew one thing. Humanity would not bow so easily.
The docking bay remained silent after Liara's whisper. Her people had never failed before. For generations, the Cathari had subdued entire civilizations with nothing more than a gaze. Their ability to pierce minds, to bend wills, was absolute. Yet here stood Elias Ward, unbroken, standing tall before her. Liara tried to recover her composure. She straightened her posture, lifting her chin. "You will surrender," she said again. But this time her voice lacked the certainty it had carried before. Her eyes glowed as she pushed harder, sending a wave of pressure into Elias's mind. The force was strong. Elias felt as though a storm was raging inside his skull. His knees trembled for a moment, but he dug in his heels. He thought of the colonists, families, farmers, children, people who had trusted him to keep them safe. If he surrendered, all would be lost. That thought gave him strength, and slowly he forced the pressure back. Liara gasped. She stumbled one step backward. Her soldiers, who had stood at the edges of the docking bay, looked at her in confusion. Never before had they seen their envoy falter. Elias took a step forward. "You will not take Horizon 6, he said firmly. "And you will not break me." The words cut through the heavy air like a blade. For the first time in her life, Liara felt uncertainty. She lowered her gaze, not in defeat, but in confusion. How could this man resist her? And why did his defiance stir something in her that felt unfamiliar? The humans escorted her to the negotiation chamber. Elias walked beside her, his presence steady. She should have hated him for resisting, but instead, curiosity filled her thoughts. The chamber was simple. Metal walls, a long table, chairs on both sides. Screens displayed images of Horizon 6, the colony she was here to claim. The human officers sat silently waiting. Liara began the meeting in the way her people always did, with authority. "The Cathari Dominion offers survival in exchange for obedience. Your colony will become part of our empire. You will provide resources and labor. Resistance is pointless." The human officers stirred uncomfortably, but Elias leaned forward. His eyes did not waver from hers. "You speak as if we have no choice. But we always have a choice." Her silver eyes flickered. The connection between them returned, faint but undeniable. She felt his will pressing against hers, not to dominate, but to meet her strength with his own. It was unlike anything she had experienced. Liara faltered slightly. "You do not understand. No race has resisted us. Your kind is fragile. Your worlds will fall one by one." "Maybe," Elias admitted. "But we fight. That is what makes us human. We don't surrender just because someone tells us to. The officers nodded, encouraged by his words. Liara felt her chest tighten. His defiance should have angered her. Instead, it drew her in. His gaze carried no hatred, no fear, only determination and something she could not name. Hours passed as the talks continued. Liara explained the might of her empire. She described the fleets that spanned the stars, the civilizations already subdued. Her voice was calm, rehearsed, almost mechanical. But Elias listened carefully, and when he spoke, his words pierced through her practiced lines. "You say you bring order," he said, "but what I hear is chains. You say obedience ensures survival, but what kind of life is it if you're not free?" Liara stiffened. No one had ever questioned the Dominion so directly. Her own people did not dare. Yet this human, this man, spoke to her without fear. Something stirred within her again. She remembered her training, the teachings that the Dominion was absolute, that all other species were beneath them. But sitting across from Elias, she began to doubt. His words lit a spark she had never felt before. When the meeting ended, she stood quietly. Elias escorted her back to her quarters aboard the human station. As they walked, she could feel the weight of his presence beside her. At her door, she paused. "Why do you resist me?" she asked suddenly. Elias stopped. His eyes met hers once again, and the strange connection surged. Liara felt her knees weaken. "Because humanity has always resisted," Elias said simply. "We face storms, wars, even extinction. But we endure. That's who we are." The glow in her eyes dimmed slightly. She whispered almost to herself, "Endure." For the first time, she felt uncertain not only about her mission, but about herself. On Horizon 6, the colonists were just waking, unaware of the storm above their heads. In orbit, the Cathari fleet shifted into attack formation. Dozens of ships moved with frightening precision, their black hulls glimmering like obsidian knives against the stars. In the command center of the human defense station, alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the control panels and officers rushed to their posts. Commander Elias Ward stood at the center, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Cathari were moving closer, their weapons already powering up. "They're coming in fast," reported Lieutenant Harper, his voice tight with fear. "All squadrons ready, but—" "Sir, we're outnumbered 10-1. Elias did not flinch. He knew the odds. He had known them since the first day the Cathari ships arrived. But humanity had never measured strength only in numbers. "Then we fight 10 times harder," Elias said firmly. "Signal all ships. Form defensive lines. Protect the colony at all costs." In her chamber aboard the human station, Liara felt the shift in the air before the alarms reached her. She closed her eyes and stretched her senses outward. Through the void, she could feel the Dominion fleet preparing their strike. Their wills pressed forward like a tidal wave, certain of victory. For most of her life, she would have welcomed that force, but now she felt only dread. She had seen Elias resist her power. She had seen humanity's fire, and now she could not bear the thought of watching it extinguished. A knock came at her door. Elias entered, his uniform crisp despite the chaos around them. His gaze locked on hers, and once again that strange bond surged between them. "They're attacking," Elias said. "I don't know what choice you're going to make, Liara, but I need to know. Are you with them or with us?" Liara's throat tightened. She had been raised to obey the Dominion without question. But when she looked into Elias's eyes, she saw something she had never known before. Trust. He believed she could choose. He believed she could be more than what her people had made her. She hesitated, the weight of centuries of tradition pressing against her. Then softly she said, "I cannot fight for them. Not after what I've seen." Elias nodded once, as if he had expected her answer all along. "Then stand with us. Together, we might have a chance." The battle began with fire. The Cathari ships opened a barrage of energy blasts, each one powerful enough to tear apart a human cruiser. The orbital defense platforms fired back, streaks of plasma lighting up the darkness. Human fighters swarmed, weaving between the massive alien vessels, striking at weak points with desperate precision. The colony below shook as defensive shields absorbed stray impacts. Civilians huddled in shelters, listening to the distant thunder of war. On the command deck, Elias gave orders with steady calm. "Squadron 3, break left. Draw them into the asteroid field. Use the rocks as cover. Station Gamma, focus fire on that destroyer's engines," the crew responded, their fear balanced by his certainty. Even outnumbered, humanity refused to yield. Liara stood beside Elias, watching the tactical display. She felt the pull of the Dominion fleet, their collective will pressing against her mind, urging her to obey. It would be so easy to surrender, to rejoin the tide. But then she looked at Elias, saw the sweat on his brow, the fire in his eyes, and she knew where she belonged. She closed her eyes, focusing her power not as she had been trained, to dominate, but to shield. Waves of silver light rippled from her, unseen but powerful. Human pilots, once vulnerable to the Cathari's mental strikes, felt the pressure lift. Their minds cleared, their focus sharpened. "Commander," Harper shouted in surprise. "Our squadrons. They're resisting the Cathari interference. Their formation is holding." Elias glanced at Liara. She stood tall, her silver eyes glowing brighter than ever, her hands clenched in concentration. "I cannot break them," she whispered. "But I can protect your people from their reach." Elias's chest swelled with pride. "Then do it. Hold that line." The battle raged for hours. Human ships darted in and out of the fight, striking where they could. The Cathari were stronger, faster, and more advanced, but they were not used to resistance. They were used to easy victory, to opponents crumbling before them. Humanity's defiance unsettled them. Liara felt it too. Through her psychic senses, she could feel the Dominion commanders growing impatient, their certainty shaken. She knew they would escalate soon, and they did. The Cathari flagship moved forward, its massive cannons powering up. The blast it prepared could shatter the orbital station in a single shot. "All batteries target that flagship," Elias ordered. Human ships fired everything they had, but the enemy's shields were too strong. The flagship's cannon glowed brighter, ready to fire. Liara gasped. She could feel the weight of the Dominion's will behind the weapon. It was more than technology, it was intent, sharpened into destruction. If the cannon fired, the station and everyone aboard would be lost. She turned to Elias, their eyes locked. "I can stop it," she said softly. Elias frowned. "How?" "By turning their power against them. But if I do, the Dominion will see me as a traitor. There will be no going back." Elias's gaze held hers. "Then don't go back. Stand with us. Stand with humanity." Her chest tightened. She had surrendered once before when their eyes first met. But this time it was not surrender to force. It was surrender to choice, to freedom. She nodded. "Then it is done.